Good evening and welcome to Gravitas. I'm Palki Sharma Upadhyay. Let's get started.
Gravitas, co-presented by
SBI Mutual Fund, a partner for life.
Chemistry That Matters, SABIC. Co-powered by Star Health Insurance, the health insurance specialist. Driven by Kia Sonet, wild by design.
No state should be above the law. China's turn has come. These were the words used to pull up China at the United Nations Human Rights Council. In a rare rebuke, the UN body slammed China for the persecution of Uyghurs in Xinjiang and for curtailing the rights of the people of Hong Kong. It may not make a lot of difference in China's approach, but the condemnation is significant and long overdue, we say. China has rejected all the allegations as baseless, but it has no answers to the many accounts and stories of state-sponsored persecution. We've been telling you about what's been happening in China, about the plight of the Uyghur Muslims in Xinjiang, from state-sanctioned rape to slashing birth rates to mass jailing of more than 1 million people. Xinjiang is witnessing a modern-day genocide. We've also told you about Tibet on this show. An old victim of China's crackdown and occupation. It is back in focus with mass labor camps. And then we have Inner Mongolia, where China is trying to erase the identity of locals. On Gravitas tonight, we'll tell you how Beijing has intensified all these crackdowns. We'll also bring you an exclusive interview with an activist who has challenged the might of China. Also on the show, from London, Nawaz Sharif has indicted the Pakistan army for destroying his country. He's forbidden his lawmakers from meeting army generals. How did the former puppet prime minister turn into a critic of the army? We'll get you a special report. Can you imagine owning a company that once owned your people? An Indian businessman may have pulled off the most pinching colonial joke. He's bought the East India Company and transformed it into a luxury brand. The Netanyahus have been accused of taking bags full of dirty laundry on state visits. The Israeli embassy is finding it tough to clean this mess. We'll get you that report. And climate protesters are back from Berlin to Sweden to the Arctic. Young protesters want world leaders to do more to save the planet. We begin, as always, with Gravitas Global Headlines.
China, the United States and Russia clashed at the United Nations over responsibility for the coronavirus pandemic. The three nations traded allegations about who mishandled and politicized the virus in one of the few real-time exchanges at this year's COVID distance UN General Assembly meeting.
Collection of funds by proscribed terrorist outfits, ostensibly for undertaking charitable activities, but which in reality would be used to finance terror.
Lashing out at Pakistan in the UNHRC, India's first secretary to the UN, Pawan Badhe, has said that the proscribed organization, meaning Pakistan, is collecting funds ostensibly for undertaking charitable activities, which in reality would be used to finance terror. Two people have been injured in a knife attack in Paris, near the former offices of French satirical magazine Charlie Hebdo. Two suspects have been taken into custody. The Vodafone Group has won an international arbitration case against the Indian government in a $2 billion tax dispute. In a landmark ruling by The Hague, it has been decided that India's imposition of a tax liability on Vodafone were in a breach of an investment treaty agreement between India and the Netherlands. North Korea's Supreme Leader Kim Jong-un has issued a rare apology for the killing of a South Korean official. According to the South's presidential office, Kim reportedly told his South Korean counterpart Moon Jae-in that the incident should not have happened. Alexei Navalny's spokesperson has confirmed that the Kremlin critic is likely to remain in Germany for weeks as he still requires lengthy treatment to recover from poisoning. Meanwhile, Navalny has thanked the pilots and paramedics, crediting them for saving his life. As Brazil grapples with the second deadliest coronavirus outbreak in the world, samba schools in Rio de Janeiro have decided to delay the country's most famous carnival parade that would normally have been held in February 2021. Thousands of Maasai men gathered this week for a ceremony that transforms them from warriors to elders. Around 15,000 men from all over Kenya and neighboring Tanzania congregated to feast on roughly 3,000 bulls and 30,000 goats and sheep. The ceremony occurs once every decade. Bayern Munich clinched the Uefa Super Cup crown in Budapest after a come-from-behind win against Sevilla. Europa League holder Sevilla stunned the Germans early with Lucas Ocampo scoring an audacious no-look penalty in the 13th minute. The Champions League winners pressed hard for an equalizer, and it came in the 33rd minute through Leon Goretzka. There were no more goals in normal time, and it was an extra-time winner by Bayern's Javi Martinez that sealed the victory. Hansi Flick's side have now not lost in 32 games across all competitions. The Los Angeles Lakers are one win away from reaching the NBA Finals for the first time in a decade after beating the Denver Nuggets 114-108 in Game 4 of the Western Conference Finals. The Lakers star duo of LeBron James and Anthony Davis combined for 60 points, but James' key contribution came at the other end as he denied Nuggets talisman Jamal Murray some key baskets in the closing stages. The Lakers are now 3-1 up in the best-of-7 series and will progress with victory on Saturday.
Tonight, we'll talk about China's wars. Not the ones that it's trying to wage on its borders, but the wars within. The wars that the Chinese state wages on its own people. Tonight, we tell you about 3 regions in China: Tibet, Inner Mongolia, and Xinjiang. These are among the largest in China. Among almost 5 crore people live here in these 3 regions, these 3 provinces. China has a population of a little more than 139 crores. And these 3 regions, Tibet, Inner Mongolia and Xinjiang, represents less than 4% of China's population. There are also 3 autonomous regions of China. Specific minority groups have a higher population here. In some areas, the population of minorities is more than the majority Han Chinese. And that is what Beijing wants to change. It has launched a relentless campaign of oppression, crackdowns, internment camps, indoctrination, coercion. China's minorities face all of this. We'll begin with Tibet. This week, we got you 2 reports about China's mass jails for Tibetans. Thousands of people forced into labor camps. Look at these. China says they're being educated, but they are being brainwashed. They're being detained against their will, forced into labor, and then shipped off to different parts of the country to do low-wage jobs. These are slave factories. The idea is to force Tibetans to give up their linguistic, cultural and spiritual heritage. China wants to erase their identity by forcibly assimilating them. More than 500,000 Tibetans have gone through this training this year alone. It was followed by forced labor. Several thousands have already been sent to work in far-flung cities and towns. Officials in Tibet have been given quotas, targets you could say. they must send a specified number of Tibetan laborers. Larger districts are supposed to supply more workers. Some numbers have been reported: 1,000 from the Tibetan capital of Lhasa, 1,400 from Shigas, 800 from Shannon. Those who cannot meet the targets are punished. Those who do are rewarded. Agents and companies are subsidized to organize transfers. The rates are fixed: $74 for each laborer moved out of the region, $44 for those who are placed within Tibet. There is no other way to describe this. Tibetans are being trafficked, and this is a state-sponsored racket. Then we come to Inner Mongolia. Same story. China wants to erase the unique identity of Mongolians. It is targeting their language. Last month, a new order was issued. School children must be taught in Mandarin and not the Mongolian language. The people protested. Students staged walkouts. Parents pulled their children out of schools. Online petitions were circulated. How do you think Beijing responded? It went after the protesters. They were threatened with arrest. The demonstrations were suppressed. Those who still protested were put under surveillance. Chinese officials targeted the parents. What you're seeing now are copies of a WeChat message, a message that was allegedly sent by local authorities to Mongolian parents. This was a warning. It says if parents did not send their kids to school by the 17th of this month, they will lose access to government subsidies. Banks were told to stop loans for the next 5 years to parents who did not comply. High school students who did not attend classes were threatened with expulsion. This is the punishment for protest in China. The state goes after you. It goes after your family. It goes after everything you've got. Then there's Xinjiang. Communist crackdown on steroids, you could say. The world's biggest detention program, mass internment camps, open abuse of more than 1 million people. The world has slammed China, but Beijing remains undeterred. It is building more detention facilities. The New York Times reported this today. The story has some numbers. There are some 380 suspected detention sites in Xinjiang. At least 61 have expanded their area. 14 are still growing. Remember, China is believed to have incarcerated as many as 1 million Uyghurs in recent years. And now it is raising down mosques. The Australian Strategic Policy Institute has come out with an assessment. They use satellite images to study how Xinjiang is being changed, and they estimate that around 16,000 mosques, you heard that right, 16,000 mosques have been destroyed in the last 3 years. According to this report, 8,500 have been completely demolished. 30% of this region's key Islamic sites have also been demolished. How much more proof does the world need against China? It is wiping out its minorities, their culture, their identity. Practicing your faith has become a crime in China. In the name of national cohesion, China has launched one of the worst oppression campaigns in history. So what is the world doing to stop China? Precious little. There are sporadic statements of condemnation. There are campaigns once in a while, even celebrity endorsements, but nothing concrete to hold China accountable. And yet, the Chinese state remains on the edge. It is wary of a potential flare-up. The people in these regions have not given up their cause. Tonight, we bring you an exclusive interview with one such activist who has challenged the Chinese state to raise the voice of her people. Ladon Thetong is a Tibetan independence activist. In 2008, she traveled to Beijing during the Olympics to protest against Chinese oppression. She says China's crackdown on minorities comes as no surprise to her. She's in Boston. I spoke to her earlier today. I'm joined by Ladon Thetong, a Tibetan independence activist and director of the Tibet Action Institute. Ladon, welcome to WION.
Thank you very much for having me.
So military-style camps, forced labor, re-education of Tibetans. The world is horrified by the reports that are coming out of Tibet. Are you surprised by any of this?
Sadly, no, I'm not surprised, though the news is devastating and disturbing. Tibetans have known for far too long that not only is this a possibility, but things like this are likely happening. Information just trickles out of Tibet these days. China has so effectively locked down all of Tibet. Tibetans can't get out. Diplomats, observers, journalists, others can't get in, or certainly not easily at all. And so it's really difficult to know what's happening on the ground. And this report, this news that just broke, was, not surprising and upsetting, but also just sadly another part of China's campaign to destroy, and I think you said it best, to destroy the Free Tibet movement.
Well, stories of Chinese persecution of all ethnic minorities and groups are very old, but suddenly there is international focus. Do these recent moves do you think they also have something to do with the fact that the Chinese state may be fearing another Tibetan uprising?
I think that the Chinese government actually, this is exactly it. They live in constant fear of what might happen in Tibet. 2008, when Tibetans across Tibet, in the lead up to the Olympic Games, did exactly what the Chinese government wanted them not to do, which was rise up, protest, go into the streets and say, we are not Chinese. We are not prospering and benefiting under Chinese rule, as the Chinese government is presenting in its Olympic propaganda. And we want freedom, and long live the Dalai Lama. These were the cries of the Tibetan people in 2008. And it was such an unbelievable PR disaster for the Chinese government, and such a real threat to China's national security, that everything since 2008 has been about how to make sure it doesn't happen again. I think the Chinese authorities know, the world can see after 60 years of unbelievable violence and policy after policy designed to break the spirit of the Tibetan people, they continually come up with failure. 1959, the uprising, 1987, 88, 89, and then 2008. And so now I do believe this is all, tightening the grip and trying to look for, and I have to use this term, in a way, it's sort of a final solution for the Tibetan issue. And I think we see that in East Turkestan or Xinjiang as well.
Do you think the issue of the Dalai Lama's succession will be a flashpoint between Tibetans and Beijing, or do you see some sort of a capitulation given the campaign that Beijing is running?
I think it is certainly going to be a flashpoint. I think for Tibetans, there is no more painful issue than to think about what will happen when it comes time to choose, when it comes time to find the 15th Dalai Lama. And I know certainly that I guess on some level, it doesn't have to be as bad as I think it could be if world governments, and then the international community really steps in now and tries to hold Beijing to account. There's this idea that China doesn't care and Xi Jinping, they'll just do what they want, regardless of what anybody says or does on the international stage. But it's simply not true. The Chinese government cares what the world thinks, and their actions are mitigated. What they are willing to do or not willing to do, they're constantly testing the international community. And unfortunately, so many in the world react to Beijing in a way that is to back away or back down the minute that the Chinese leadership gets angry or upset or threatens. It's exactly the opposite thing that should be done in dealing with this Chinese government. Show of strength is important. To hold firm to your principles and your values in the face of their aggression is really important. And in the case of Tibet, I really believe that the international global support movement for Tibet and all the global attention on the Tibetan issue, the spotlight over these years, has saved Tibet in a way from what is happening in East Turkestan and in Xinjiang.
India is home to the Tibetan government in exile. What role do you think New Delhi can play in bringing attention to the persecution of Tibetans in China?
The Tibetans in India are so much the key to, and have always been the key to, the survival of this great and ancient civilization and culture and people, the survival of the Tibetan people. And the Tibetan government in exile in India is the legitimate representative of the Tibetan people inside Tibet. And so I think anything that can be done to bolster, to continue this unbelievable project and the generosity that India has shown to Tibetans, but not just on a sort of humanitarian basis, on a political basis as well. I think Tibetans have a lot to, in a way, teach the world about who really is this authoritarian China? I think China has done a good job to a certain degree up until now of sort of masking its true face. And I think with the recent incursions in India and Ladakh, with the sort of bellicose posture the Chinese are, the way that China is acting in the world right now, we see that the future of Tibet and this future of survival of this Chinese People's Republic of China, this authoritarian China, is really, the Chinese government represents one of the greatest risks, not just to the survival of Tibetans, not just to the national security of India, but to the peace and security in the world. And I think that's clearer to people now.
Ladon Kithong, thank you very much and more power to you.
Thank you very much. Thanks for the attention on this issue.
Meanwhile, China was subjected to some scathing criticism at the ongoing UNHRC session today. Several leading nations, along with Uyghur activists, called out China for human rights violations. The European Union, Britain, Australia, Canada, these were among the countries that voiced their concerns on Xinjiang, Tibet, and Hong Kong. They called upon China to restore basic legal rights in Hong Kong and open up the Xinjiang and Tibet regions for the world to scrutinize China's actions. Britain pulled up China for violating the Sino-British Joint Declaration on Hong Kong. It demanded complete independence of the former British colony's judiciary. Germany voiced concerns over the existence of political re-education camps in Xinjiang and widespread surveillance of the Uyghurs. Canada's ambassador, Leslie Norton, voiced alarm over the separation of Uyghur children from their parents. Look at this.
Also of grave concern, in Xinjiang, there is compelling evidence, including from the Chinese authorities' own documents, of systematic human rights violations. Culture and religion are severely restricted, and we have seen credible reports of forced labor and forced birth control. Staggeringly, up to 1.8 million people have been detained without trial.
We are particularly alarmed at human rights violations in the Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region, including mass arbitrary detention and separation of children from their parents, repressive surveillance, as well as reports of forced labor and forced sterilization affecting Uyghurs and other minorities.
He is held hostage in China's concentration camp. My brother is forced to assemble phone chargers as a slave labor. Your charger may be among them. 3 million Uyghurs being detained in concentration camps. Imagine the population of Berlin or Chicago locked up as slaves. The genocide, including sterilization and organ harvesting. The Chinese government ban our language and burn our books. Overall, CCCP has sought to eradicate Uyghur identity, the culture. There can be no doubt that their crimes meet the definition of genocide as laid out in the UN Genocide Convention.
गालिबन एक बार साबिक वज़ीर आज़म यूसुफ रज़ा गिलानी साहब ने कहा था कि यहाँ स्टेट विद इन स्टेट कायम है जिसे बर्दाश्त नहीं किया जा सकता। दुख की बात यह है कि अब मामला स्टेट विद इन द स्टेट से आगे निकलकर स्टेट अबव द स्टेट तक जा पहुंचा है।
A state above the state. Without taking any names, Nawaz Sharif virtually indicted the Pakistan army for ruining his country. What he said is not new. It is no secret that army generals run Pakistan, but the fact that a former prime minister is saying it is quite significant. How did Nawaz Sharif, once an army puppet himself, turn into such an open critic of Pakistan's all-powerful military? We'll try to understand today. I'll start with the latest. Nawaz Sharif has banned his party members from meeting the Pakistan army. The announcement was made on Twitter. Let me quote from what he said. Recent events once again prove that some meetings are hidden behind 7 curtains and how some are advertised as to the wishes of some. This game needs to stop. In future, no member of our party will meet with representatives of the military and relevant agencies at individual party or personal level to remind them of their compliance, unquote. This is a leader in exile. Some very strong words coming from him. What is Nawaz Sharif talking about? The Pakistan Army's attempts to influence the opposition. Yesterday we told you how Imran Khan wants to make Gilgit-Baltistan Pakistan's 5th province. There are plenty of benefits for Islamabad and the Pakistan Army. It will give Imran Khan's PTI an edge in the upcoming election. It will give his government a strategic edge over India. It will provide more money to the army generals by legitimizing CPEC projects with China. The Pakistan Army wants to join this cause. It is clearing the road for a smooth passage of the Ascension Bill. Secret meetings are taking place at the army headquarters. Some opposition leaders have also fallen into this trap, like the governor of Sindh, Mohammad Zubair, a senior leader in Nawaz Sharif's party. He is said to have met the Pakistan Army chief twice in recent weeks, along with some other opposition leaders. And these meetings have not gone down well with Nawaz Sharif, and these meetings are the ones he was talking about. His party, remember, recently managed to establish a grand political alliance to take on Imran Khan. So almost all major opposition parties in Pakistan have joined what they're calling the Pakistan Democratic Movement. They plan to carry out a civil disobedience movement to dethrone Imran Khan. The protest will be launched next month. The PMLN, which is Nawaz Sharif's party, plans to continue this campaign at least till January next year. Lawyers, traders, farmers, students, journalists, everybody has been invited to join this movement. It promises to be bigger than the so-called Tsunami March, which Imran Khan had organized in 2014. It was a months-long movement that pushed him into national politics. He went on to become the Prime Minister in 2018 thanks to the Pakistan Army's support. Nawaz Sharif has something similar planned. The only difference is that he is taking on the army as well. He aspires to put an end to the Pakistan Army's control on the civilian government, or at least that's what he's suggesting. So he's openly criticizing army generals. And this is extremely ironic because Nawaz Sharif himself was a puppet in the hands of the Pakistan Army at one point in time. He has been Prime Minister thrice. He has worked under several army generals. In fact, he was among the few civilian leaders to have friendly relations with the military establishment. But that loyalty clearly took him nowhere. He ended up getting deposed by the army general in 1999. That was Pervez Musharraf. Nawaz Sharif was put on trial for corruption. He went into exile. He came back stronger in 2013. He became Prime Minister for the third time. He's said to have told his confidants that he would curtail the role of the army and ensure the supremacy of civilian governments in Pakistan forever. To add to that, the army saw Nawaz Sharif as pro-India. He invited the newly elected Prime Minister of India, Narendra Modi, to Islamabad. The Pakistan Army did not like any of it, so it propped up Imran Khan. Then the Panama leaks happened. The Azadi March followed. The rest, as they say, is history. Nawaz Sharif is 70 years old. He is living in exile in London. He is looking at a comeback of some sort. He is locking horns with the Pakistan Army. He's not as powerful. He does not have the public sympathies this time. He's going down politically, but he wants to go down fighting. Now, you must have heard of the British East India Company, the company that ruled India and a large part of the Indian subcontinent for 250 years. It plundered India. It looted India's artifacts, traded slaves, laid the foundation for the British colonial rule. Why are we talking about the East India Company tonight? Because this company that once owned India is today owned by an Indian. Here's the story.
This is the biggest colonial irony. Imagine owning something or someone who once owned you. Well, that's exactly what an Indian has done. He has bought the East India Company. You must be familiar with the company's name. In case you aren't, here's some history. The East India Company owned India and much of the Indian subcontinent. Not for one or two, but a good 250 years. The company was founded in the year 1600 by a group of English merchants. They pooled in nearly £70,000 to start the company, which was originally meant to trade spices. In 1613, the company established its first factory in Surat. That's in present-day Gujarat. In 1757, the East India Company seized control of the Mughal state of Bengal. How, you ask? Through force. The East India Company's charter authorized it to wage war. Back then, it had a 3,000-person strong army. It was led by Robert Clive, who went on to become the governor of Bengal. Soon the East India Company shooed the French and the Dutch from the Indian subcontinent. It went on to conquer a big chunk of the Mughal Empire, which includes present-day India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and half of Afghanistan. Now, if you think a Facebook or Apple or Google is powerful, consider this. The East India Company dominated much of the Indian subcontinent between 1611 and 1858. It literally owned this territory. At its height, the company had an army of 260,000. That's more than the present-day British Army. The company was responsible for almost 50% of world trade and enjoyed a near monopoly on the global tea business. The East India Company was the most powerful corporation the world had ever seen. It controlled everything from the opium trade to the slave trade. What happened then? In 1858, the British government ended the company's rule in India. By 1874, the company was dissolved. Cut to 2003. Indian businessman Sanjeev Mehra bought 21% shares of what remained of the company. He reportedly partnered with businessman Anand Mahindra and Gulf-based retail tycoon Musuf Ali Ma. In 2005, Mehta acquired shares of all the other stakeholders. The deal gave Mehta the right to the name, the East India Company's chop marks, and its coat of arms. Mehta also got the replication rights to all of the company's exhibits kept in museums worldwide, and the reprinting rights of all old documents, including navigation maps, records, and library materials. So what has this Indian businessman done with the East India Company? He has transformed it into a luxury tea, coffee, and food brand. The company has outlets in the United Kingdom and West Asia. But that's not the man's biggest achievement. He has made a statement by owning a company that once owned his people. He has pulled off the most pinching colonial joke. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
Let's talk about Turkey. A new crackdown unleashed by President Recep Tayyip Erdogan. His government has issued arrest warrants against 82 people. Many of them are members of a pro-Kurdish opposition party, the HDP, or the People's Democratic Party. Turkey, or the Turkish government, has accused them of encouraging countrywide protests back in 2014. The protests left 37 people dead.
Our party is in no way responsible for the demonstrations of October 6th to 8th. On the contrary, it is the policies that the government carried out at that time and the choice to announce the attacks of the Islamic State as good news.
Turkish prosecutors have not specified the offences that these 82 people have supposedly committed, but it said that crimes during the 2014 protests included murder, attempted murder, theft, looting, burning the Turkish flag, damage to property and burning, and of course I said burning the flag. Among the accused is the mayor of the eastern city of Kars. His name is Ayhan Bilgen. He and 64 other members of this opposition party had won Turkish municipality elections in March 2019. Erdogan has been actively pursuing them ever since. Earlier this year, 32 mayors from opposition parties were removed from office. Vaguely worded court cases were used to back that move. The Erdogan government went on to take over at least 47 municipalities. So opposition mayors were replaced by government-appointed trustees. 20 mayors, democratically elected leaders, were detained. And now, as Erdogan launches a countrywide hunt for opposition leaders, there are no specific charges to back their arrest.
The more they lose, the more they attack us. And the more they attack us, the more they lose.
This party, the HDP, like I said, is a pro-Kurdish party. Kurds make up roughly a fifth of Turkey's population. But they continue to struggle for recognition in a country dominated by people of Turkish ethnicity. This is a story we'll keep tracking. For the moment, let's talk about Israel. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is back in the headlines, this time for his laundry. Reports say he got his dirty laundry cleaned at the expense of another country, and that the Israeli Prime Minister and his wife carry bags of dirty clothes on state visits just so that they can be dry cleaned for free. And if you think this is the most embarrassing thing a leader can do, you'll be surprised with the details of our next report.
When leaders travel abroad, what do you think they carry with them? An entourage apart, US President Donald Trump carries his beast. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un carries his commode. Don't ask us why. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu carries his dirty laundry. A bag full of it, sometimes 2 or 3. What for? Free dry cleaning. You didn't see this one coming, did you? Neither did US officials. But they found themselves picking up massive laundry bills again and again and again, every time the Netanyahus visited. Be it during the Obama era or the President Trump administration. In 2018, leaked transcripts revealed that Israeli First Lady Sarah Netanyahu was packing 4 to 5 bags of soiled clothes for every state visit. Now, the Israeli embassy in Washington is having a hard time cleaning this mess. The question is, why can't the Netanyahus get their clothes laundered at home? What are they saving for? Because even their ice cream is being paid for by the Israeli citizens. Reports in 2013 claimed Netanyahu was spending $2,700 annually on ice cream. He likes to stock up his official residence with his favorite ice cream flavors, pistachio and vanilla, in case you were wondering. And since we are talking about embarrassing, little-known things, let's tell you some more. Did you know that world leaders wear makeup? Yes, they do. Some of them wear a lot of it. Take French President Emmanuel Macron, for example. He once spent over $30,000 in 3 months on makeup. Former Irish leader Bertie Ahern spent $101,000 on makeup in 4 years. Have you heard of this French leader called François de Rugy? He is the Minister of Ecological and Solidary Transition. But what he is better known for are his lobster bills. After all, they were making headlines globally. The leader would host lavish meals of lobsters and shellfish for his friends. They would also be treated to vintage wine that would be priced at $580 a bottle. Guess who was paying for all of this? The French taxpayers. They were mad when photos from these galas surfaced online. What did the French minister have to say in his defense? He said, "I don't like lobsters." Sure, neither do we. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
The world is still fighting the Wuhan virus pandemic, but climate protesters are back. They're back on the streets and they're protesting around the world today. Young activists and adults protested. The pandemic won't stop them. And some of them are going to great lengths to make their voice heard. Here's a report.
They are young and they are restless. From Berlin to Sweden, in Sydney, and even on the ice in the Arctic, young protesters are back, demanding that world leaders do more to save the planet. The Friday strikes made famous by Greta Thunberg have resumed, even when the world is yet to shake off a pandemic. The protests are different this time. There were no big crowds. Thunberg herself protested with a group of less than 50 people in Sweden due to restrictions. She believes the social distancing rules won't hurt her campaign.
Well, the main hope is, as always, to try to affect, to have an impact on the level of awareness and the public opinion, so that people will start becoming more aware of the climate crisis, so that we build up this pressure on the people in power, so that something happens. And if we are not allowed to be more than 50 people, then we won't be more than 50 people. Then we will be fewer people and more spread out.
Climate protests made their debut at the Arctic Ocean too. 18-year-old environmental activist Maya Rose Craig took a trip to the icy region. The Arctic is one of the fastest changing ecosystems on the planet. Craig wanted to draw global attention to the shrinking ice.
Being in a place like this feels like one of the best experiences in the world. It feels like one of the most precious resources we have on this planet. It's so beautiful, it's so unique, and all I can think about while I'm here is the fact that it could be gone by the time I'm 30, and that is horrifying, it's disgusting.
While Maya Rose Craig was protesting alone, in Berlin the story was quite different. The German capital was an exception, one of the few cities that witnessed large crowds. Thousands of young people gathered to protest. They wore masks and maintained distance. Many chose to ride their cycles around Berlin's landmark, the Brandenburg Gate, for a rally.
Wir sind nicht hier, weil die Klimakrise gefährlich ist. Wir sind hier, weil wir wissen, dass es nicht so bleiben muss. Wir sind nicht hier, weil es brennt, sondern weil wir wissen, dass man löschen kann. Wir sind hier, weil wir wissen, dass eine klimagerechte Welt möglich ist, solange wir für sie kämpfen. Deshalb sind wir heute hier.
The campaigners claim that more than 3,000 locations witnessed a protest on Friday. But there are few ways to assess the impact of the campaign. World leaders remain focused on the Wuhan virus, but the young protesters say their campaign will continue. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
Now for our daily segment on the US election. 39 days to go. The crowds at the election rallies are gaining strength. Doubts are being cast on the fairness of the election process. A fierce debate has ensued over peaceful transition of power. And Donald Trump has reiterated his offer to mediate in the India-China border standoff. Let's start with Trump's offer. Speaking to reporters outside the White House earlier today, Trump delved into his nomination for the Nobel Peace Prize, and then he switched to the ongoing India-China face-off. He said the two countries were having, quote-unquote, substantial difficulty, and if America can help, it would love to. Take a look.
Well, it was an honor to be nominated for 2 Nobel Prizes, so that was an honor, and we'll see what's happening. I know that China now and India are having difficulty, and very, very substantial difficulty, and hopefully they'll be able to work that out. If we can help, we'd love to help. Mr. President, how did you feel about...
In he jumps again, convinced that he's the best person to negotiate peace, his own endless wars with China notwithstanding. As for the electoral war, it has entered the final 6-week stretch. Donald Trump has upped the ante. He campaigned in 2 states in one day. He traveled to North Carolina and then to Florida. The rally venues were packed. Trump's speeches filled with action. He called Kamala Harris the furthest left in the U.S. Senate. And Joe Biden, the lowest energy individual he's ever seen.
Supposing he never campaigns and he wins, you know how badly I'm going to feel? I'm working hard. And you got to work hard. And you know what? I said it today. We cannot have a low energy individual as our president. We can't. And he's the lowest energy individual I've ever seen. So we'll see what happens, but he's lighting up. Maybe he's going to be great at the debate. You know, he's been doing it for 47 years. Somebody said, oh, he won't do well at the debate. I said, I think you're wrong. He'll do fine. He's going to do fine. They'll give him a big shot or something, and he'll go out there. He'll have a lot of energy. He'll have energy. He'll be like Superman for about 15 minutes. Kamala. You know, Kamala is further left than Bernie. I didn't know that. She is the furthest left in the U.S. Senate.
Meanwhile, transition of power post-elections has become a subject of debate. Donald Trump has refused a peaceful transition, casting doubts on the election process. His fellow Republicans do not support his stance, though. They think he's pushing it too far. This includes Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, Republican Senator Marco Rubio, and Republican lawmaker Liz Cheney. They've all reaffirmed their faith in the final result, and they are all promising a peaceful transition. The Democrats have found new fodder. Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi slammed Donald Trump for disrespecting his oath of office, and she reminded him that he is not in North Korea.
But I remind him, you are not in North Korea, you are not in Turkey, you are not in Russia, Mr. President. And by the way, you are not in Saudi Arabia. You are in the United States of America. It is a democracy. So why don't you just try for a moment to honor your oath of office? I don't know why the press doesn't make more of this, to be very honest with you. I mean, he says that people swallow Clorox, and we hear about it for the rest of our lives. But he's trying to have the Constitution of the United States swallow Clorox.
Speaking of the Constitution, Donald Trump went to pay his respects to Ruth Bader Ginsburg. The deceased Supreme Court Justice, First Lady Melania Trump, accompanied him. Both of them had their faces concealed in a mask as the couple emerged on the steps of the Supreme Court building. This is what happened. This is going to be a very interesting election, and we'll be tracking it for you. With that, it's a wrap on this edition of Gravitas. Have a good weekend. We'll see you on Monday, leaving you with Gravitas Images.